Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has expressed disappointment after talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Neither humanitarian corridors for the residents of the besieged city of Mariupol nor the 24-hour ceasefire urgently requested by Ukraine had been agreed. We talked about a ceasefire, but no progress was made in this regard, Kuleba told journalists in Antalya. That's in Turkey, and where they met on Thursday. However, he had agreed with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to continue the talks in this format. According to Kuleba, Ukraine will not capitulate. Ukraine thwarted Russia's plan. Russia will not get a surrender from Ukraine, he said. His country is ready for a balanced diplomatic solution. Lavrov's account was that Russia would continue its aggression until Ukraine met Russian demands. In his own words, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov referred to the proposals his country had already submitted during the talks. An answer was wanted, Lavrov said after the meeting. He accused the West of dangerous behavior and pointed out that the West was supplying Ukraine with the deadly weapons. It is unclear who could get their hands on the missile launchers that were delivered. His country's military operation in Ukraine is going according to plan, Lavrov said. Plan, my ass. Lavrov has denied allegations that Russia is committing war crimes in Ukraine. He described the attack on a maternity clinic in the port city of Mariupol as a hoax. Russia had already informed the United Nations on March 7th that the former clinic no longer had medical staff but a camp of ultra-radical fighters from the Ukrainian battalion Azov, he said. He spoke of a manipulation of the entire world with information on alleged atrocities committed by the Russian army. According to Lavrov, his country will emerge from the crisis with a new view of the world. Russia will have no illusions about the West and will try never to be dependent on the West again. Yeah, the West has a very new view on Russia. The UK government has announced a new system for Ukrainians to enter the UK. Home Secretary Priti Patel announced that Ukrainians who hold a passport will be able to complete the necessary applications entirely online from Tuesday. Those seeking protection without a passport must therefore continue to submit their applications to special centers and have their biometric data recorded. There has been a lot of criticism of the processes so far. Hundreds of Ukrainian refugees have reportedly been turned away in Calais on the French Channel coast. Instead, they should submit their applications in Brussels or Paris. Compared to many EU countries that do not require visas, Great Britain has so far taken in only a few refugees from Ukraine. As of Wednesday, the country had only granted 957 visas. More than 22,000 applications for family reunification for Ukrainians were made. Yvette Cooper, the Labour politician responsible for domestic policy, described the British government's actions to date as shameful, despite the simplification. She called for the programme to be expanded. So far, the UK has only issued visas to people from Ukraine whose family members already live in the country. In addition, visas should be able to be sponsored by companies or private individuals, so it's completely different from what the EU is doing. The allegations of sexism against Sony are getting louder. Security analyst Emma Mayo sued the Japanese company last November. She complained, Sony prefers men, treats women disparagingly, and offers female employees almost no opportunities for advancement. Other victims have now spoken out. As the new tech news portal Engadget reports, 8 other victims joined the lawsuit. These have worked for Sony in the past or are currently still employed by the company. Women were consistently passed over when it came to promotions and were not seen as possible high performers by male managers. In a round of applications for an open management position from April 2019, only 4 of the 70 candidates were women, of whom only 2 were classified as high performers, in contrast to the male candidates, who all received this classification. Sony has not yet commented on the new developments. In February, before the 8 women joined the lawsuit, the company filed for dismissal, saying the allegations were unfounded. A hearing and decision on this should take place in April. By spreading misinformation, Moscow wants to pave the way for further escalation of the unjustified war of aggression in Ukraine, US President Joe Biden's spokeswoman Jen Psaki warned on Twitter. Russia is following a clear pattern of behavior, either to use weapons of mass destruction themselves or to fake an attack by the Ukrainians in order to construct a justification for continuing the war, Psaki wrote. Psaki's statement came after allegations by Russia that Ukraine is developing nuclear or biological weapons. Only on Monday did the Russian Ministry of Defense claim that there was a network of biological laboratories in Ukraine working on behalf of the US Department of Defense. However, international fact-checkers have long since invalidated this claim. The United Nations had previously stated that it had no knowledge of weapons of mass destruction allegedly produced in Ukraine. UN spokesman Stéphane Dujarric said in New York that the World Health Organization was not aware of any activities by the Ukrainian government that conflict with its international treaty obligations, including chemical or biological weapons. Meanwhile, the British government believes it is likely that Russian mercenaries will be used in the invasion of Ukraine. The Ministry of Defense in London therefore assumes close contacts between Moscow and private Russian military companies. In view of the activities in other countries, the British ministry is concerned. Russian private military companies have been held responsible for human rights abuses in several countries such as Syria, Libya, and the Central African Republic while operating for the Russian state, the statement said. 2 weeks after the start of the Russian attack on the neighboring country, it was not possible to agree on at least a temporary ceasefire or even further escape corridors, as I said in the beginning of the video. The European Union wants to discuss the situation at a summit in France yesterday evening, and they did that. Despite the lack of progress, Turkish Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu, present at the meeting as a mediator, was cautiously optimistic afterwards. Nobody expected that this meeting would solve all problems, but a start had to be made, he said. According to Cavusoglu, the meeting took place in a difficult climate but was civilized. Since the beginning of the war, there had been talks by negotiators about temporary ceasefires. However, the foreign ministers' meeting in Turkey was the first high-level attempt at negotiations. Ukraine had made it clear that, in principle, they wanted to talk about ways to end the conflict. Lavrov, on the other hand, subsequently explained that the right forum for this would be the talks that had already begun in Belarus, a common neighboring country that is closely allied with Russia. For his part, Kuleba, the Ukrainian foreign minister, complained that Lavrov was unable to agree escape corridors himself, not even for the port city of Mariupol, which was suffering particularly badly. The Russian foreign minister must discuss this in Moscow, he said. There was also talk of a 24-hour ceasefire, but we have not made any progress on this issue because it seems that these decisions are being made by others in Russia, Kuleba said. However, both Lavrov and Kuleba were in principle ready for further talks. As a condition for a cessation of fighting, Russia is demanding that Ukraine declare themselves neutral in its constitution. In addition, Kiev must recognize the annexed Black Sea Peninsula of Crimea as Russian and the separatist areas of Luhansk and Donetsk as independent states. Both sides had recently indicated a certain willingness to compromise. But Kuleba emphasized, Ukraine has not surrendered, is not surrendering, and will not surrender. Kiev is ready for diplomatic solutions. According to Lavrov, Russian President Vladimir Putin also has nothing against meeting his Ukrainian colleague Volodymyr Zelensky. However, preparation work is required for this, and he means a complete surrender in writing. China has reported the highest number of infections since the first corona outbreak in the central Chinese metropolis of Wuhan. As the state news agency Xinhua reported on Thursday, 402 local infections with symptoms were discovered nationwide on Wednesday, almost twice as many as the previous day. There were also 435 asymptomatic infections and 277 cases imported from abroad. After the first major wave of corona, which originated in Wuhan more than 2 years ago, China was able to quickly bring the virus under control with strict measures. Since then, the second largest economy has only experienced outbreaks limited to individual regions. But since Omicron was first discovered in the eastern Chinese port city of Tianjin at the beginning of January, health experts have feared that the more contagious corona variant could push Chinese protection measures to their limits. With Beijing and Shanghai, individual cases were recently discovered in the country's two most important cities. New infections were reported from 7 provinces and regions on Wednesday alone. The northeast Chinese province of Jilin was particularly hard hit, where there were 165 symptomatic infections. When the SARS-CoV-2 virus broke out in Wuhan in December 2019, a curfew was imposed on more than 50 million people in the central Chinese metropolis and neighboring cities. It was the beginning of the drastic measures that the country's most populous country has taken to largely get the virus under control. Everyday life has now largely returned to normal. Since then, China has reacted immediately to just a few cases with lockdowns, mass tests, contact tracing, and forced quarantine. Since the summer, there have initially been only a few local infections. Since the beginning of the year, however, China has again experienced larger outbreaks in the provinces of Jilin, Heilongjiang, and Hebei, individual infections in Beijing and Shanghai. The authorities are alarmed because there are gaps in prevention, especially in rural areas. The US government refuses to supply MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine because of the risk of escalating the conflict with Russia. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said the Secret Services had come to the conclusion that Russian President Vladimir Putin could misinterpret the deployment of fighter jets as an escalation step. The United States also rejected a proposal by Poland to hand over MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine with a stopover at a US base in Germany. On the one hand, Kirby commented directly on Poland's proposal, but also made general statements with regard to deliveries of fighter jets to Ukraine. We do not support handing over more fighter jets to the Ukrainian Air Force at this time, he said. Poland's proposal was problematic simply because the fighter jets were to fly from a US or NATO base into contested Ukrainian airspace. We believe that the deployment of additional combat aircraft provides little additional capability at high risk, Kirby said. At the same time, he made it clear, we are not drawing a red line here. The plan could lead to a significant Russian response that could increase the prospects of a military escalation with NATO, Kirby warned. The potential for an escalation should not be increased, also in view of the fact that Mr. Putin has other abilities. Russia is a nuclear power. There is no doubt about it, the Pentagon spokesman warned. The US Department of Defense also stressed that the Poles had not discussed their proposal beforehand. The South Koreans have elected conservative opposition candidate Yoon Suk-yeol as their new president, making a turning point after almost 5 years of liberal rule. In a close race, 61-year-old former Attorney General Yoon won the election by a razor-thin margin over his closest rival from the ruling Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung. Yoon described his triumph as a victory of the people at the National Assembly in Seoul. National unity will have top priority. The left liberal Lee admitted defeat and congratulated Yoon. He wants to take full responsibility for the outcome of the election. After counting almost all the votes cast, Yoon received 48.6%, Lee came to 47.8%. Other applicants were irrelevant. An official confirmation of the election result was still pending when I was making the script. Yoon is considered a political newcomer. He only entered politics last year and was eventually voted the candidate of the main opposition party, the People's Power Party, the PPP. He will succeed President Moon Jae-in in May, who was unable to run again. The president is elected for a one-time 5-year term. The presidential election is of enormous importance for the fourth largest economy in Asia. In the country's presidential system, almost all important decisions are made through the head of state. The president can also rule against a majority of the opposition in parliament. The Democratic Party still has the majority there. Participants in a protest on International Women's Day set fire to the government's palace in Monterrey in northern Mexico. Videos on social media showed how participants on Tuesday evening set the entrance of the building on fire with cheers and screams from bystanders. Flames blazed up at the bottom of the door and also adjacent windows. Recordings published by the Info7 portal showed how demonstrators also penetrated into the interior of the government seat of the northern state of Nuevo León and rioted there. The women pasted or wrote protest notes on the walls and statues of the building, and they ranged from protesting against violence against women to general criticism. "We are the cry of those who no longer have a voice," read one of the posters, apparently alluding to the murder of women. According to Info7, the fire brigade extinguished the fire after about an hour. The arriving police cordoned off the area and arrested some women who were still nearby. According to local media, the demonstration on the occasion of International Women's Day started peacefully during the day. As a result, almost 12,000 people took part. Many protesters called on the government to better protect women and take action against femicide. According to information from the Mexican federal government, an average of 10 women are murdered every day across the country. In other parts of Mexico, thousands of women also took to the streets on March 8th, some equipped with pyrotechnics. The barricades protecting the National Palace, the seat of government in Mexico's capital, also became the target of protests. Among other things, demonstrators attached pink crosses to the meter-high barrier as a symbol for the victims of gender-based violence. For the first time in more than 10 years, an Israeli president has traveled to Turkey. Herzog said during his visit to Ankara on Wednesday that Israel and Turkey could and should work together on many issues that are having a dramatic impact on this region we all call home. Erdogan called the visit historic. He hopes to achieve a turning point in relations between the two countries. Both posed with a long handshake after their joint press conference. The once close allies, Turkey and Israel, fell out in 2010 after 10 Turkish citizens were killed when the Israeli Navy stormed a Gaza solidarity ship. In 2016, there was a rapprochement. However, since the Gaza crisis in 2018, which escalated around the opening of the US ambassador in Jerusalem, the two countries no longer have ambassadors in each other's countries. According to Herzog's office, the last time an Israeli president visited Turkey was in 2007. Turkey is likely to be primarily interested in better economic relations. Israel is also working with other countries to advance a gas pipeline through the eastern Mediterranean. To their displeasure, Turkey has so far been excluded from this. With regard to the Ukraine war, Erdogan said that the current global political situation shows how important energy security is and declared Turkey's willingness to cooperate. Both countries maintain close relations with Russia and Ukraine and are in talks as potential mediators. On Turkey's initiative, the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia, Dmitry Kuleba and Sergei Lavrov, met in Antalya on Thursday. The US company Moderna is permanently waiving patent protection for its corona vaccine in 92 low and middle income countries. The manufacturer announced that the patents would never be enforced in these countries. The prerequisite is that these vaccines are produced exclusively for the use in these countries. The German magazine Wirtschaftswoche had previously reported on it. These are countries where Gavi, the Vaccination Alliance of governments, companies, foundations, and UN organizations, implements the COVAX program. Moderna President Stephen Hoge told the magazine that the company is also foregoing royalties. Moderna doesn't ask for any money to use the patents. We don't make any profit with it. On the contrary, said Hoge. Moderna also plans to produce, fill, and package mRNA vaccines in Kenya. Moderna announced on Monday that the company had signed a corresponding letter of intent with the Kenyan government. One will invest up to $500 million to produce up to 500 million vaccine doses for the African continent annually. In 2021, Moderna had already announced that it would like to build such a plant in Africa. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.